Good evening, Gia. Good evening to our audience. And we are now back to our weekly podcast, Geo-Politicus. And today we are basically we'll try to cover several very hot issues. First of all, the special operation of Ukrainian special forces that actually denied Russia of one third of its strategic bombers. Uh, 75-minute conversation today of President Trump and President Putin, as well as negotiations in Istanbul between Ukraine and Russia, and possibly some other issues related to European security. Yeah, how are you?
Well, I'm doing well. Good to see you, Georgi. It's been a
You
couple
too.
weeks, but thank you for fortifying the fort here while I was away. So, very interesting. Last few months have been very interesting, of course, but last few days, especially as it relates to Ukraine, I think we just witnessed something really on an unprecedented scale. Um, and I think it would be useful for us to talk about what happened. Everybody on social media, in international media, I don't think there are too many people in the world that have not found out or learned about what happened in Russia. And I mean the Ukrainian attack on four Russian military air bases. Some of them were hosting, or some of them had strategic bombers parked on these air bases, and Ukraine took out, by Ukrainian information, about 34% of Russia's strategic airplanes, which is some of which were part of the Russian nuclear triad. So devastating blow, really. And then yesterday, we of course saw explosion on the Kerch Bridge, which was an underwater explosion. The bridge was damaged, but it seems like the traffic has been opened on it. And this was the third Ukrainian attack on the Kerch Bridge since 2022 full-scale invasion. So these are the basically basic facts, but let's talk about what this means, especially the attack on the air bases. What do you make of it? What's How significant is this?
Well, it is pretty significant, and I think this is a unique operation that is basically will go down to the history of warfare and special operations. And I think the uniqueness of that is that this is first time ever that anyone basically attacked the strategic forces of a great nuclear power. Um, you mentioned the Holy Trinity, I call it, which is the nuclear triad or strategic forces that possess nuclear weapons. This is weapons that are based on the sea, basically naval forces. Then you have the ground forces that deployed on the ground, and then you have the air deployment, which is basically the strategic bombers. Um, all of these air bases that you have mentioned today, now they were all part of this strategic forces, network, let's say. And on top of this, we have to understand then where you have a base of the strategic bombers in Russian reality, it means that you have a nuclear depot. I mean, the warheads have to be located there as well.
Mhm.
So basically, you have attacked on the not only the bombers but also on the side where the nuclear warheads are stored, and this is very much significant.
Yeah.
This attack has several aspects to that: technical, logistics, the effects would I would say what kind of effects it had. for internal audience, for outside the world, etc. So for technical reasons, I would say that it was the idea was brilliant. It was simply uh, brilliant because you use a cheap material. I'm talking about FPV drones, which cost from $100 to $400 to blow up basically multi-million dollar equipment,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
airplane, right? Um, and the main thing is that how this was actually managed, not logistically to bring it to the country, to work out the whole system, how it will work. This is one thing, but how these drones were managed, how they managed to basically, uh, steer them to the airfields and hit the targets. So whether they were using the satellite communication, whether they were using AI installed in the drones, or they were using some other technology, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But for sure, that shows the edge, the technological edge that actually Ukraine now possesses over Russia. I'm talking about the contemporary systems that are used for this kind of attack.
Mhm.
The second is that logistically, just for our viewers to understand, the airfields that were attacked were somewhat like 4,000 kilometers apart from each other. I mean, we are talking about a really very, very deep inside Russia territories that cannot be just, I mean, Ukraine doesn't possess, let's say, missiles to reach that targets because of the distance, but they were brilliantly calculated how that can be done in terms of bringing these, let's say, weapons, FPV drones,
Yeah.
but it is weapon, closer to the base and then launching them like 2 or 3 miles out of, in the close vicinity to this base and hit the targets. And then we obviously go back to how capable Russia is to counter this kind of operations. So it seems to me that the Russian special force, we're talking about the wartime country, and it has a full-fledged war with Ukraine. It's supposedly, we understand that Russian special forces or counterintelligence has to be concentrated on the threats coming from Ukraine. Yet this large scale operation was actually not detected at all, and it was extremely successful.
Yeah.
So
Russians were
it seems
saying
very.
that there were more bases involved, or at least they were saying that they averted some the attack partially. So there's also a theory that we, of course, don't know. Ukrainians have not talked about it, but there is a possibility that there were more bases selected for this attack, and we just don't know yet. What do you
We
think about
what is known for now. I agree with you that there is something also on set. There were two more trucks that were detected on the early stage that very day that did not reach the destination, and then they were self blown up,
that? Hmm.
so destroyed basically by Ukraine. I mean, remotely, they were destroyed. Maybe the other base, which I was actually one more very well known strategic base. I mean, base for the strategic bombers in Russia is Engels
Hmm. Yes.
in Saratov region of Russia. That was not touched, and that's why I think these two trucks,
That's where they
these
were.
special trucks, whatever,
Hmm.
drone trucks, were blown up probably close to that base, and that you know the plan was to attack that base. I
Hmm.
don't know the details. That's what I read in one or two actually sources, and it is not confirmed. It's like kind of
Hmm.
theory.
Yeah,
People
there's definitely something to that. Yeah, because there were some reports again on the Russian Telegram channels that
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Very interesting. Ukrainians said that they're not able to at this point. They are not able to share all the details of the operation, and that to me was also interesting. It's like what
No,
is there to share? There.
obviously, we don't need to know more
Yeah.
as an ordinary, common people, let's say,
Yeah.
because and going to the effectiveness of this. First of all, I mean, you already mentioned the losses. Russia lost one third of its of strategic bombers, and just for our viewers, these strategic bombers all were produced during the Soviet Union, and they're not produced, so they're lost forever. They cannot be replaced by new planes.
Right.
Russia is not producing them anymore. Um, Secondly, I mean, reputational damage is huge. I'm talking about the reputation of the special, let's say, counterintelligence agencies, a reputation of the military, because, like, you're supposed to guard this kind of air bases very tightly, and it's unbelievable that in 2 miles from the airstrip
Yeah.
you can launch the attack on
There
them.
was a there was also one of the sort of critiques or criticisms of that operational security of those bases also included that the planes were not covered with camouflage. I don't know if such planes would be covered with something, but there was one thing that the base was basically completely exposed. And again, this is not an expert view, but some people were saying that the security it was so unexpected that the security on the bases was very lax
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it was well, they have some sort of air defenses, but when we talk about FPV drones,
Yeah.
which are tiny,
Yeah,
small,
of
they are
course.
very difficult to detect by radars, and then you cannot fire missiles
Yeah.
to hit them. So,
There
I mean,
was
it was, and by the way, if you are launching them like 2 miles from the airstrip or the airfield, basically, you don't have time to prepare for
no, of
anything.
course not. And
It's
we did hear in some of the footage, you could hear the machine gun fire that
yeah,
some of the Russian soldiers or the people on the bases were trying to shoot them down. So that's basically the only protection that you could have from some of those drones, right? To shoot them down. So I'm going to ask you
so
another easy question to answer.
please, please.
So President Putin and President Trump spoke on the phone. President Trump put out that Truth Social message talking about the phone call. So maybe because this happened just recently, not too long ago, um, tell us about what he says. And then also, I think it would be interesting to sort of talk about or think about General Kellogg's statement, which said that Ukrainian attack increases the risk of escalation. Um, so, what do you think about those two things? First of all, what do you make of President Trump's Truth Social message?
Well, through social media, yeah, all the only information that we have about this, quite long, by the way, 75 minutes conversation over the phone with President Putin. We all know this from his True Social posts that he actually published. Um, now we know that from President Trump that Putin stated that he will retaliate. He will not leave this attack unanswered, which is obviously expected and whatever. But I just want to underline one more issue, that if he will be targeting again the civilians, it is an equivalent answer to this attack, because Ukrainians were actually targeting solely the military objects,
On the military, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So then the second very interesting information that actually need to be more digested, I think, by professionals in this field, that Russia according to President Trump, might be become a part of the negotiations with. Sorry, I had a call. What is it? Negotiations with Iran, which is very unexpected. I'm talking about the nuclear program, etc., of Iran. And he also states in his post that President Putin agreed with him that Iran should not be in a position to develop nuclear weapon.
Right.
So this is a kind of an interesting statement, an interesting turn, I would say,
Hmm.
because basically for Russia, this is very much, how can I put it, favorable turn, because now Russia will feel more being more important on the international stage, because maybe exercising some influence over Iran in favor of some third party, but also, let's say, negotiating something beneficial for themselves.
Of course.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is not a charity inclusion of someone into the process.
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
we should.
And sorry to interrupt you, Georgi, but I think it's at this point, I think it's important to remember that, remember President Obama was saying the same thing, that, yeah, we don't see eye to eye with Russia, but Russia is a useful partner or useful whatever member of the international community to have a conversation with Iran. So this Russia, Iran, America's desire to solicit Russia's help with Iran is just unending. And Iran has not stopped developing its nuclear program. Russia has not stopped Iran assisting with development of, at least on the civilian side, nuclear capabilities. And Russia is getting more and more belligerent, starting from 2008, when at that time Obama started to sort of reset with Russia. So, what do you make of this? What is it that Russia holds as it comes to Iran that America needs Russia to negotiate with Iran?
Well, I think taking into account that, and absolutely agree with you 100%. I cannot say more, and your observation is absolutely right. And going back like this couple of decades back, we can just retrospect that Russian involvement with Iran vis-a-vis U.S. interests are always prolonging the process, softening the pressure on Iran at the end of the day, and making and putting Iran in the position that they can sneak off certain sanctions, and the regime can stay another period of time and
Yeah.
whatever. So these are the consequences, as already mentioned. What I make of it is that basically for Russia, I mean, look, Russia and Iran, especially now in the light of the war in Ukraine, are close allies. Iran is supplying Russia with weapons. Russia supplies Iranian Air Force with their newest type of attacking aircrafts. So this
Yeah.
is a bottom line that we have to understand. Secondly, is that of course Russia and Iran, being long-time allies, I would say, they can play games. I mean, big games with even with such a big player as the United States, because basically not um, just through negotiation, the first to prolong it. Second is to get uh, as much as it is possible out of there, like making minimal concessions, because like you are playing 2-1, you know, and that's the nature of this triangle. And I think this is fundamentally wrong for the United States, first of all, to involve anyone else, anyone, Russia, China, it doesn't matter, anyone into the negotiations with Iran, because U.S. has its own stakes, has its own interest, and if Iran wants to actually negotiate something with the United States, that should be done directly with the United States. Because when you have a third party comes with its own interest, and Russia, for now, like having whatever they have in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, and standoff with the West in general, has a lot of other interest to negotiate through this process.
Mm.
So involvement of Russia now is just, look. We also have to understand, after Bashar al-Assad was actually basically ousted from Syria, Russia largely lost its grip on the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
presence in the Middle East as well, political, military, you name it. Through this negotiation, Russia, in my opinion, I think, will be able, together with Iran, play additional role because, as we all know, Russia has relations with Hamas. Russia has relations with Hezbollah and other this kind of terrorist organizations that are actually officially, the delegations of which are officially uh, accepted in Russia in Kremlin. They are frequently visiting Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. So, and this will be another psychological maybe boost
Mm-hmm.
for these organizations that, okay, Russia is back. We have again Russia in the game, and that's how it is going to develop. I think it whether it will yield any sort of positive results, I don't know. I'm not here to judge that, but we are here to basically. I'm doing is that just following your comments that you just provided as a basis for what we have. I'm just developing my sort of ideas what it might be, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. What do you think the reaction to this would be from the Saudis, from Turkey? Because
I don't
that's also
Yes,
something.
yes. Well, what
It's a
the
very
reaction will be from
complex
the side
issue,
of
right?
Israel as well. What about Israel? What the reactions from Israel will see? It's too
Yeah, well,
early because
I can see the reaction from Israel, which would be use any means possible to, prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And
uh,
I think Israel is having a very measured, very careful relationship with Russia. And it's been going on because of Syria, because of some other Middle Eastern issues. Israel has always been very practical with Russia. Israel supports Ukraine on different levels, but at the same time is not confrontational with Russia. And partly, again, it was explained by Russia's role in Syria. Um, and also with Iran, I guess, because again, Russia has been this like constant in relations between Iran and the United States. Maybe not relations, but in negotiations between U.S. and Iran. It seems like the Kremlin is this player that's always somehow there when the U.S. and Iran want to sort of figure out how to proceed on the nuclear issue. So
well, I would.
Israel's reaction, I think, would be if it's what it takes for Iran to stop its nuclear weapon development, so be it. But I think they would also have some sort of timeline on this as well.
I think I would a bit argue with you on Israel. Why? Because first of all, Israel's, yeah, you're right. Israel's relations with Ukraine is good. They're supporting Ukraine, but this support is very measured.
Hmm.
It's never too much. Relations with Russia was actually quite important part of how can I put it? Israel's international outlook towards its own region. But after October 7th and all these movements of Russia related to Hamas, Hezbollah, and others, and Iran, these relations are much colder than it were before. They
Mm-hmm.
basically are stalled. When it comes to Iran, I think we all know it's a common knowledge that Israel and Israeli government was the one who was pushing Trump's administration to basically strike Iran. I mean, help Israel to strike Iran. So Iran's position, I think that nuclear program of Iran has to be stopped not through the negotiations, but
Mm-hmm.
through the destruction
Destruction.
of the site.
Yeah.
So I think that in the current involvement of Russia, I mean, possible future involvement of Russia, might not be in the interest of Israel at all, because of those aspects that you just mentioned from the very beginning of talking on this
Mm-hmm.
issue. So I think the opinions will be divided. When it comes to Turkey, I would say that the attitude of Turkey will be also measured because, on the one hand, of course, Turkey and Iran are historic rivals in the region, and no doubts about it. Especially, it was seen lately in Syria, and we know
Mm-hmm.
how it went
Yeah.
lately. On the one hand, on the other hand, Turkey is a great supporter of organizations like Hamas, official. So there, I would have some sort of also, I think, measured approach from the side of Turkey. Careful, but not neutral. I would not say it will be neutral. Saudi Arabia, that's a great question because the last visit of President Trump to Saudi Arabia and in general into the Gulf states, I would say, was successful not only economically but also in terms of the arms sales. So arms sales in the real political world means strengthening its allies in the region. So basically, I think Saudi Arabia undeniably will be paying a lot of attention to this process, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they will particularly like the involvement of Russia in the process because if Russia can be involved, then being, let's say, not a superpower, of course, but definitely a regional uh, power of great influence, I would say, Saudi
Mm-hmm.
Arabia might also have an appetite to be part of it because
Mm-hmm.
development of a nuclear weapon by Iran is not in the interest of Saudi Arabia either.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yes.
So we'll see. That's why I'm saying that reading this sentence in the post of President Trump was very interesting for me to understand where this process might lead us and how it can be like predicted the end game of all this if there is
Do
an
you think,
end game.
do you think he's talking about a trade-off? The U.S. leaves Ukraine or drops out of the negotiations or drops support to for Ukraine in exchange for Russia doing something. And then the question on top of that is, are the Iranians going to listen to the Russians and give up their nuclear program that's just half an hour away from them having a nuclear weapon?
You know what? Let me put it in this way: if the good deal for Iran and Russia will be negotiated, let's say by Russia, in this case, what I would do is that I would not talk about Ukraine at all. I would talk about lifting the sanctions first and foremost that allow my economy to strive
Yeah.
and that allow my economy to wage the war as long as I want. and that allow my economy to produce more new generation weapons, so I can be more effective militarily on the battlefield. This is
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that
The second, if I'm Iran, if I'm half an hour away from developing the nuclear warhead, what I would do, I will postpone this half an hour, let's say 5, 10 years from now, and lift the sanctions, develop again my economy, get rich, get resources, basically
and
to
then
feed my regime and my proxies in the region, and then use this half an hour a bit later to change the regional outlook once and for all.
yeah,
This is my understanding. That might be wrong, of course, but this is a possible. It's like ex-prompt analysis one.
yeah.
So yeah, but definitely it's an interesting development that was to pay attention and was to look after.
Another there's so much stuff that's puzzling with Russia's involvement in Iran nuclear program issue. And one of those
Mm.
puzzling things to me is, why does the United States think that there's a possibility of Russia and Iran together could somehow be honest players, honest negotiators to advance America's interests, if that makes
I think I
sense?
have an answer.
You
I
do.
think I have an answer. Yeah,
Okay.
because but I would a bit correct your question. It's
Okay.
not why United States thinks like that. It's why President Trump thinks like that.
I will push
I,
back
I,
on
I I will explain.
that.
I will explain why.
Hold that thought. But I understand what you're saying. And I'm not saying that the President Trump does not think that. But it's not only President Trump, it's all the other American presidents and since Putin's been in power. So that's why I'm saying America, not just one particular president. See, so
Yeah,
what is it that
because
Russia has? I don't know.
well, I think in the United States, and this is partly true. It's not entirely false. In the United States, in the high echelons of power, Russia is perceived as a big country that has to be respected because of its, size, resources, nuclear arsenal, and many other things. Uh, One. The second is that basically Russia for a very long time was seen as not friendly, but not as an adversarial power, at least in 90s and early 2000s. I think, well, nothing is going on in the global politics without Georgia, but as we know,
Yes.
2008, there were some sobering moments for some politicians in the West, but not for all. And we've seen that in 2009, this famous footage of Secretary Clinton handing over the red button of Peregruska, which has to be Perezagruska, by the way,
Yeah.
to Mr. Lavrov, which didn't work. But there was a perception at that time among Democrats that this is possible, and we now hear one of the authors of this reset, Ambassador McFaul, who is now criticizing everything that relates to Russia. But at that time, he was actually patiently believed in, possibility of reset with Russia. So going back to my remark on President Trump vis-a-vis U.S., why I'm saying it right now here, I think the late disillusionment from previous administrations is already there, but
Mhm.
disillusionment of Mr. Trump is still,
Yeah.
way ahead of us.
Yeah.
So why I'm talking about Trump? Because just one factor, he's a very trusted man, Representative Witkoff. He was flying between Moscow and Tehran and Washington and other capitals constantly for the rest, for the last several months. We know about it. So I think he pick up either from Russians or from Iranians or from both the notion that it would be good if this third party will be involved, and this will bring us to certain type of result, etc., etc. And that was discussed with President Trump, and basically having
Yeah.
very close personal relations with President Trump, this decision was made.
Yeah.
After all,
Well, yeah, we.
that's my
I'm not very familiar with Special Representative Witkoff's statements on Iran. To be honest, there may have been some things, but I just um,
oh, he
lately
made
I've been
several statements
watching.
lately. He made several statements saying that well, they were positive actually of the
Mhm.
negotiation process somehow because at first U.S. proposals were basically rejected, etc., and then the negotiation started, etc. Well, this is a closed door negotiations, as we know. We can just assume, we can think about something. That's what my first thought was, but we know that Witko has an influence on President Trump, or vice versa, I would say, and close relationships. So if there is something communicated through Representative Witkoff to the President of the United States, and then the President makes a decision based on that, we don't know, but he made this decision, as you can see, because that
Yeah.
was discussed. It's not a sudden discussion between the two presidents. I think that was in the making for some time, I would guess.
It seems to me that is it a decision the way I read it? The Truth Social message was that there is a possibility of this happening. But what's interesting to me is that now Trump is talking about imposing some timeline on Iran, saying that Iran is slow walking this
Yes.
conflict or this negotiation or the outcome of this negotiations. Um, and he's not mentioning anything about the 2 weeks deadline that he gave Putin to actually deliver something that was tangible for the ceasefire in Ukraine,
Yes.
Russia's war in Ukraine. So there is something uh, unexplained, or at least unknown to us going on. Because President Trump was very, I think at that time, was very vocal about, okay, well, I give him 2 weeks. And now in two 75-minute conversation, at least the readout or his message does not say anything about. I reminded Putin that the clock is ticking. He says, well, clock is ticking on Iran, and Putin's going to try to help me to stop this ticking of Iranian bomb. So
Yeah.
it's very, very, I just don't understand it. That's how I'm going to phrase this. What do you make of it? Do you see it that way? That somehow Iranian factor in this conversation is sort of taking the spotlight away from Putin, that President Trump put Putin in about a week and a half ago.
I don't know, but interestingly enough, some other piece of information was actually also um, disseminated today that President Trump asked Senate to hold off from considering the bill on additional sanctions against Russia. I'm talking about this 500% tariff on oil and other oil products uh, prepared by Senators Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham. So that is also interesting.
Um, it is interesting, and we'll see what happens with that bill. There is some hope for it. It can definitely pass for sure. because on the Senate side it has 82 votes, which is pretty incredible. Bipartisan, a huge majority. On the House side, I would have a hard time believing that there would not be at least a dozen Republicans who would vote for it. And Republicans don't have a great majority on the House side. So just a couple of Republican votes can actually maybe even make the bill pass. So, and that would be a veto proof majority really on the Senate side, right? Because it only takes 63 senators to overcome, two-thirds of it to overcome the veto.
Yeah.
Um, so the bill has an option of passing, and we should see if President Trump. So one of the theories explaining, or maybe some people's wishful thinking, who knows? But at least one of the theories is that President Trump can use this particular bill and tell Putin that, hey, I have nothing to do with this. They are trying to, they will pass it. I don't have any power over this legislative process, and you have to do something. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way, the other people are saying that the U.S. legislature, and especially the Senate, realizes that America's interests are really being hurt right now because of America's policy towards Russia and Ukraine, and that's why they're trying to sort of reorient Trump to do the right things, or reorient
Yeah.
America to do the right things. So, very interesting to see how this will happen, and what result this may bring about. It also envisions, of course, sanctions. It's not only sanctioning Russia, but it's also sanctioning the third countries by
Yeah.
secondary tariffs, as they call it, which are buying
Basically,
oil and gas, right?
yeah. Basically, we are actually talking about um, how can I put it? Um, Sectoral sanction,
Mm-hmm.
deep sectoral sanction of Russian oil and gas sector,
Right.
as well as their clientele. Let's say.
Yep.
Basically, it also targets, I think, India and Chinese companies that were actually very much
It
involved in
also
the.
uh, it also targets some of the European countries that are still buying, unless the language, I have not seen the language of the bill, but unless the bill specifies certain countries, then if it's sort of a blanket statement that everybody that buys Russian oil and gas would be tariffed, or 500% tariff. um,
Does
what
that
does
make
what
sense?
does that mean for some of the European countries, right?
Yeah,
So very, very interesting.
and intriguing, I would say.
Intriguing, yes. Too many unknowns, too much uncertainty at this point, in too many directions. And Georgi, maybe the last topic briefly we can go over is, I know you've been reading about the Coalition of the Willing, and you've heard a number of statements on this. So, is the coalition going to come together? What's happening?
I think, yeah, they are. I mean, you know that there was a visit of President Macron, Prime Minister Starmer, and Tusk and the Chancellor Merz to Kiev. Then we had a visit of Zelensky to Berlin, and he's still in Europe, touring around. I think the coalition is willing to basically step up.
Mm-hmm.
But what is interesting, that Bloomberg actually, based on some unnamed sources, spread information today that the U.S. is not going to provide coalition with air cover, border monitoring, and intelligence sharing, which basically, it's a no-no for the United States to act like as a backup force for the European allies,
Mhm.
which makes the future of this coalition a bit difficult. We'll see how Europeans will be able to overcome these difficulties. But interestingly enough, uh, United States for now is providing intelligence sharing and border monitoring for the Ukraine. So
Yes.
Ukraine has this data,
Yes.
so which is very important.
So
That's
it
why
could be. So
they
is
are
it
able. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I think my internet may be acting up. But is it possible to, for the Coalition of the Willing to have America's or America's this support, whether it's intelligence or satellite or not, of course, not the air power, but intelligence side through the Ukrainians? Would that be
That's
something?
what I don't know.
Uh,
That's what I don't know because usually this kind of intelligence sharing is like, I give it to you, you don't give it to anyone
right.
else,
Yeah.
either my friend or my enemy, right?
Yeah.
So this is and this is very strict, I would say. So, but um, in terms of air power, I guess European allies have enough forces, I mean air forces
Yes.
combined to assure their air superiority, at least in that areas where they are going to deploy their troops to assure their safety and security,
Right.
right? So we'll see how it will play out. We are still far away from that. Why? Because I have to go back again to mention the negotiations in Istanbul that are just passed last week without any results. Well, if we will not, I mean, there are humanitarian results of prisoner exchange and exchange of body of deceased soldiers, and the talks about returning Ukrainian children to from Russia to Ukraine, etc. But there's no any any progress in the negotiations. Because in order this coalition to be enacted, first and foremost, there should be the
Ceasefire.
ceasefire regime established. Without ceasefire regime, then the coalition then have to agree just to fight with Ukrainians, which they are not ready to, of course,
Of
and we
course.
know about
Yeah.
it. So yeah, there are no preconditions yet for the coalition to move in or move on.
Yes. Very interesting. As you may know, I just got back from Europe after I
Ah,
had a few trips to a few different countries. And it's fascinating how different the outlook on the war in Ukraine and European role in it seems, how different it seems from how America perceives it. Europeans are very, very involved. Ukraine dominates basically any conversation that you have in foreign policy, of course, domain, economic domain. Everything sort of evolves and revolves around the defense spending increase, especially by the
mm,
new German government. Mm, and there are some conversations where, and this is not new, but it has intensified, that maybe some of the European NATO countries, not the alliance itself, but some of the NATO countries can take the responsibility of securing Ukrainian skies uh, at to some extent. Western Ukraine, for example. And NATO does have the capabilities to shoot down the Russian missiles, and not from within Ukraine, but from the NATO territory. So we'll see what happens. I remember Sikorsky was talking, foreign minister of Poland was talking about this almost a year ago. And now more and more people are talking about this. So, coalition of the willing was something that many looked at in a skeptical way. That it was a nice desire, but not really backed up by the capabilities that the coalition of the willing countries have at this point, because there's no ceasefire, because it's a very long border, very difficult to monitor the ceasefire. And there were questions about the capabilities of the coalition of the willing. Like, are you just going to train people, or are you going to be stationed at the front lines to monitor ceasefire? And what happens? What would be the rules of engagement for this deployed troops, if there were troops? Can they open fire on the Russians or on the Ukrainians if they are the ones who are shooting? Or can they? Too many questions.
Yeah, rules of engagement, basically.
Rules of engagement, yes. And who sets the rules of engagement? Is it NATO? Is it by the UN standards? Is it the same? So we remember the Dutch peacekeepers in the Yugoslav war, right? They had no
Yeah,
right to
Bosnia.
do anything in Bosnia. Um, so
Well,
too many complicated questions that, again, the idea of coalition of the willing is a brilliant idea. Of course, it's not involving NATO. It's the countries who are doing it with consent, democratic governments doing it obviously with consent of their populations, not involving NATO. But then when you get into the logistical details, then too many unanswered questions.
yeah, that's obvious. But when we talk about the rules of engagement, usually they are discussed and agreed upon by the parties to the ceasefire agreement. So Russia has to be involved in this kind of agreement, as well as all of the members of the coalition of the willing,
Right.
or
But
one
Russia is not. No, no.
delegated representative.
Yeah.
Uh, so basically, you are right, and well, sometimes I do agree with you that European allies have resources, they have willingness at some point in time, but they are not ready to be on the front line per se right now.
Yes.
And
And
that's
their
why they
populations
are,
don't want that too.
no, 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 they don't want it. And that's why they are, they're moving, well, they're not moving at all, but they're acting quite fast in terms of the internal, let's say, as you said, allocation of the funds, investment in the military industrial complex, raising the number of the troops internally within the countries, doing this quite quickly.
Yeah.
But when it comes to then moving these all capabilities to Ukraine, then there is some barrier still that has to be clarified. And I agree with your feelings that um, it's not an immediate future for us to see the members of the coalition of the willing in Ukrainian soil right now. I think the current situation on the front line and in Ukraine will remain. Uh, well, for how long we don't know, but it will remain for some
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
I think this year we should not expect any dramatic change in this regard, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
again, this is my view for now. Why? Because of the last negotiations in Istanbul that yielded no result whatsoever. The ultimatum from the Russian side was again repeated, and which is unacceptable for anyone in the world, including the United States, of course. And I'm not talking about even about Ukraine itself. So the situation is in this political part of the negotiation. I'm not talking about the humanitarian part. It's in a deadlock at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been almost an hour, so let's not open up a new topic, and maybe we
No, no, no.
wrap up with
But it
this.
was always interesting to talk to you. And probably it took a longer time because we have not seen each other for what,
Yeah.
3 weeks now?
Yes. Yes. I was.
That's a
Yeah.
long break. It's
Yes, I
long.
wish I was on a break, but it definitely was a long break
Well, break from the
for
from
the yeah.
podcast, not
So
from
it's
our usual business, you know.
yeah,
Okay.
interesting. So as always, it's every time you want to say something for certain, or you want to make some sort of prediction, or okay, next week we're going to see how the negotiations will go between this and that, and then all of a sudden everything is changed. There's, in some cases, negotiations are off, or in some cases the terms have changed. So as always, let's wait and see what happens, what tomorrow brings. It would be interesting to see if there will be a briefing or oral statement by President Trump about the readout of his phone conversation with Putin, and see what that means in terms of Ukraine. So,
Ukraine, Iran, and other very pressing global affairs, I would say, which is
absolutely,
very
yes.
much interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, yeah,
Very
for
good to see you, Georgi. Thank you,
yeah.
and see you next week.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah,
It's always a pleasure.
likewise.
Thank you very much.